Hey Nick and Jesse, I wanted to record a video for you guys that I did mention to you at one point. And honestly, this is going to turn into kind of a weird hodgepodge of how I would have said it at the wedding if I had an access to a microphone slash commentary from me making a personal video at home. And to be honest, ever since you guys invited us to your wedding, I put a lot of thought into this, and I don't really know why, about what I wanted to say about Nick at his wedding, at your guys' wedding. Mr. and Mrs. Adams, I hope you're having fun on your honeymoon. So, and whoever else may see this at some point, yeah, we'll just go from there. This story takes place 19-ish years ago in September of 2002. It's a Thursday. It's September the 5th. And it is about 12:33 p.m. Yeah, I looked at a calendar and guesstimated on some stuff. So, little bit of backstory before we get to the actual story. I grew up homeschooled for the kindergarten years through 7th grade. And I didn't have that many friends, and I was a little socially awkward kid that just went to church and knew a few random other homeschooling kids and not too much interaction. So I asked my parents around before 8th grade, can I go to public school? And they were cool with it. And I was like, great, I'll go make friends and have fun and learn stuff, etc., whatever. So I thought that would go really well. 8th grade, it's rough. Middle schoolers are little cutthroats, vicious 12 and 13-year-olds. So I had some fun stuff waiting for me. Mr. Swenson, rest in peace. Mr. Swenson's class is the second period of 8th grade. And Nick, actually, me and Nick had 6 classes out of 7 all through 8th grade, all but last period. And yes, I'm gonna Rain Man some stuff, remembering or recalling all of this. So first period's math at the high school. Second period is Mr. Swenson's science class, and Mr. Swenson was gracious enough to sit me at Nick's table with another mutual friend of ours who, for reasons that will become apparent, will remain nameless throughout this video. And it was not enjoyable for me. Nick and said friend were not... I mean, they were all right. They didn't treat me super well at first, and that first week was really rough. And a lot of 8th grade was rough, and there were other years after that had their moments. But there was, on the 3rd day of 8th grade, that September 5th date, the teachers got all the 8th graders together for a planned field trip and took us out somewhere east past Mildred Knipe Park, which is near Oakland, Jesse. And they took us up some dusty hill, hot September day, afternoon. Not enjoyable. I think it was for a science, under the guise of a science look around. I think we were supposed to take sketches of stuff and drawings, etc. And maybe bond with our classmates. That went really well for me. So I know a few random kids and before school and people that I've already kind of met, etc. Tried to hang out with them as best I could. But Mr. Swenson and the other teachers that were along would try to sort us back into our little science groups to stick together and help each other, group project, whatever it was. So, and kids are nobody's listening, but me, the fresh to public school, thinks you need to take the teacher's word as God's wisdom and do whatever they say, or else, God forbid, I'd get a detention or an R&R or something of middle school. So I'm trying to hang out with Nick and our mutual friend as best as we can, all the way up this hill. And kids are pairing off and hanging out with each other. And flirting with the opposite sex, etc. And I'm just kind of lost in all of it, trying to do what I'm supposed to do with science class. Around 12, we get up to the top of the hill, still freaking hot, dusty, miserable, sweaty. I think I ran out of water at some point. Maybe after that, maybe before that. So we finished lunch around 12:30, and we start heading down the hill. I wanted to go hang out with random friends. I remember Mr. Swenson saw me and he's like, Nathan, you need to hang out with Nick and the friend. They're in your group. You guys need to do this as you go down the hill. So I start tagging along, and he goes and takes his eyes off me. So I follow Nick and friend down the hill. A few minutes later, at approximately 12:32, 33 p.m., friend turns around and sees them there, following closely, trying to hang out, talk, interject, whatever, while they're just doing their own thing, having fun and talking. And he turns around and he loudly proclaims, dude, go away. And even now, so whenever I think about that particular moment, it's still, I remember it was rough. It was right here in the feels. And me being socially anxious, etc., I don't know how to handle that. That's the major rejection right there. I'm supposed to do what the teacher says. I'm getting rejected by my group. What am I supposed to do? So I remember very clearly that I was probably really close to just crying at that point. I would, which would have been probably a lot worse for me if I had actually cried or anything. I somehow held it together. I'm pretty sure I started going the other way. I turned around, or just paused or waited at the hill, and then I get a bright idea to turn back and say, I can hold your bags for you. Like backpacks that we brought on the hill, this hike thing. So friend wasn't having it. He turned around and was about to say something else, but Nick, and this is the part that stuck with me for a long time. Obviously, I'm telling this story now. It stuck with me. Nick interjects to whatever other guy was going to say and says, dude, give me your backpack. And I hands it off, and then Nick hands both of them to me and is like, all right, here you go, carry these all the way down, something like that. So I take the backpacks, and I don't know, shoulder or whatever, 2 shoulders, 3 backpacks, I don't know. And they let me follow them down the hill. And remember, just the rest of the day went pretty fast after that. It was still hot and dusty and a bunch of bullshit. But I hung out with them all the way down and probably did that group project on my own, to be honest. Did a lot of group projects on my own that 8th grade science class. But what Nick did for me, it wasn't especially selfless because I'm carrying his bags down the hill. And he probably hasn't thought about this day in 19 years. So it was important to me. It's a little thing. And I think subconsciously, maybe even consciously, it made me want to help him out the rest of high school, etc. And so I did. I helped him out. I helped him out in 8th grade science. I helped him out in 8th grade math. I helped him out in 10th grade math, Mr. Garner's class. 11th grade math, Mr. Daly's class. 10th grade, Mr. Crocker's biology. I helped him in a lot of classes. Whatever help means, you can infer. So it wasn't like we're best friends after that 8th grade. Nick can be standoffish, could be standoffish, and there were plenty of times that it was not easy hanging out with Nick. Eventually, I think it did. It worked out. I don't know, for me, telling Nick that I can out jump you, Nick, in basketball. I don't think I could. I don't think I've ever really touched a rim, and I know Nick has. So that was a bad call on my part. Whoops. But at some point, I remember like my senior year, we hung out a lot, and I was over at Nick's house like every freaking day, unless Kim was like, get out, go home, or I wanted to maybe like see if my parents were alive or something. So that was looping back to that day on the hill where it was freaking hot. It was just an easy little thing that helped them out. They were glad to give me those bags to carry their load for them. And I don't know, I probably would have had a really shitty time in 8th grade if things didn't get better really fast, or maybe I would have just gone back to homeschool or something, or actually cried at some point. I'm not saying it was immediately easier, but I do remember specifically the very next day, probably the only Friday that we actually went to school that year because of Labor Day, I remember it was very much like easier, not as anxious, stressed, whatever emotions an 8th grader has to deal with that doesn't feel like they belong. So I feel a little compelled to turn it into some kind of moral. I would be speaking this at a wedding. So Jesse and Nick, it's the little things. You've done big steps already. You've gotten married. And there will be big moments in your life and plenty of happiness and love and joy. But remember to do the little things for each other. There will be days equivalent to some hot, dusty shithole east of Oakland that suck. Remember to carry each other's baggage a little bit. Sometimes. Take something from the other one. Carry something for them. And you can shoulder some of their burden emotionally, maybe physical, rarely. Emotionally, mentally, help each other, love each other, always. And yeah, as I pass almost 13 minutes talking, I don't know, I just really, I thought about that a lot, as I mentioned at the start, and I put an unreasonable amount of thought into what I would say at your wedding. And I just wanted to share that with you and with anybody else that might see that and get some fun nostalgia reminiscing about 8th grade. So with that said, hope you guys have a great life. I hope to hang out with you guys and my wife at some point, several times, many times down the road. Yeah. Bye.